David Hill, welcome back.
Good to be here. How are you doing, Chris?
Good. I feel like the temperature this week has been crazy. We went to like 28 degrees up to like 60 degrees one day and back down, and a few sort of seasonal headache related things because of the temperature swings, but not too bad overall. How about you?
It's a little chillier here in Florida than I'd like. We moved here for the warmth, but it's still warmer than most other places.
I was going to say, what's the temperature you're afraid to say?
We're at 68 degrees right now.
That's not warm, but that's perfectly comfortable, which is nice. In comparison to our windy and 30 degrees. Not so fun.
It wasn't that long ago that I lived pretty close to you in terms of just in the same state, just opposite sides. And so I was like, I remember.
Yeah. Before I forget, I was going to say a call for speakers for RBQ and blast off rails. And I don't know if there's anything else that I'm forgetting. Both of those have like open things right now. So if you have a talk that you want to submit, you should definitely do that. So I'm going to include links for those in the show notes. But yeah, I don't know if RubyConf had one open yet. I don't believe so.
I think that opened this past week, I think.
Oh, did it? It's not on their website. Get it on the website. Join the mailing list. Download the prospectus. Yeah, it might be there somewhere. You can find it, I guess, on your own. But I've been doing something fun that I'm excited to hopefully ship soon. It's been on my to-do list for a long time, but I've been refactoring Jumpstart, and it's been a really awesome experience in the last couple of days, because sometimes you hit a challenge and you're like, there's trade-offs that are bad no matter how we slice this. And this has some of that. But basically the core of it is like Jumpstart is a Rails application, not like a template, which you would run with Rails new -m or whatever the flag is. Those templates are like a script you run. And we have a whole bunch of those like on Rails Bytes. And that was what I was originally going to do for Jumpstart. But you quickly realize like to do a proper integration, you want to have the spacing of your private methods correct and your associations, and you want to inject a scope, and it should go with the other scopes, and it maybe should go in alphabetical order or whatever. And the tools you get for those template scripts, they're fine, but they will do very basic injections of a route right at the top of your routes file, not where you would like it to be. And you can't trust that. So if somebody runs that against an existing application, that's almost certainly not going to work exactly the way you want it. But it does work fine on a fresh new Rails app that is blank. So I got thinking about it and was like, yeah, you know what? And also those templates, they're mostly just running small things, but they're not generating. You can give it a reference to a URL where the script lives, but in most cases, especially in Jumpstart, I've got models, controllers, migrations, views, JavaScript, CSS, all kinds of files that I want to copy over into your app. So a lot of the scripts that are more complicated, those templates, they will like clone a Git repo and then copy files over in order to do that, rather than having to inline all the content of those files into one massive Ruby script. So I was like, yeah, this is not what I want. And we can't easily apply updates either. So one of the big selling points for Jumpstart, I will go upgrade it to Rails 8.1, and then I will upgrade it to Rails 8.2 and Rails 9.0 for you. And you just get merged the changes. But if it was just a template script, you don't get any of that. That's all on your own. No refactorings, none of that. Like no changes can be applied. So it turned out better to do it as a Git repo that you get access to. You clone and you can make your changes. And my initial philosophy, and I still think it's the right philosophy and way to look at it, is this is your code, your application now. So I want everything ideally to live where you would write it. So you can go find it easily. You can make changes to it. You can do whatever you want. And that has generally worked great without a hitch. It makes onboarding super easy. People can find, here's all of the models, here's all of the concerns, here's all the controllers and the routes and everything. And that works pretty well to an extent where if your application needs to, well, you get people onboarded really easily. So you can see all the features and functionality. You can add things to it. You can modify how it works if you want to improve something that we do for a more complex interaction or whatever. Great, go do that. Go change it. The problem comes down to Git merging those updates that we make over time. And so that ends up with merge conflicts. And namely, you want to change the design of the application, the UI, the views. And that's the one where it's like, yeah, if we make any changes, then you're merging and dealing with conflicts constantly. So what I never liked was the approach of hiding stuff in a gem, but I think I found a good balance to that. Devise was always a good example of you almost always have to override the views because you need to implement translations. You need to change the design. You need to add OAuth links with icons or whatever it is. It's like a thing you always do. So they have a command like Rails generate devise views and copies them over from the gem and drops them in your app and you change away. And if you need to go apply updates, you typically have to go look at the devise gems HTML and see what's changed. But you can look at the commit history and find that. But it always felt a little weird because like locally, you don't have the files. They're hidden away wherever your Ruby gems live. I typically go to GitHub, but then you're looking at like main, the main branch, which may not be actually the exact version that you have locally because you're using... Because
you're on an older version.
Exactly. You're using the published version and main may actually have some changes since then. And that's a mistake you can make pretty quickly. So what I ended up doing yesterday, and I've tried this a few times, but never quite had a clean implementation that just worked, but I've moved 95% of the helpers, views, controllers, etc. models, concerns into the Jumpstart gem that ships with your copy of Jumpstart. So the Rails app folder feels almost like
empty?
A brand new, empty, almost like a brand new Rails app. The only thing I have left in there is the user model and the account model, because chances are you're adding associations to those. You're like modifying those almost certainly. So those didn't seem logical to hide away, but like inbound webhooks model, really, really useful. But chances are you're not even touching that. You're actually just touching the processing of the webhooks and things. So those other models like account invitations, probably not changing that. So the accounts can live in your application folder, but account invitations could hide in the Jumpstart gem. Hide, I say, because what's great about this is all that code is findable by your editor because it lives in the lib folder. So when you search your project, you find all those things. When you do want to override inbound webhooks, copy paste that file into your application folder and then make your changes. So then there's no Git conflicts. When I make a change to it, you can keep an eye on the change log and the Git diff or whatever you want to look at whenever you merge changes. But it's turned out to be a pretty good balance. There is, of course, trade-offs on like, I have to pay attention now to the lib Jumpstart changes so that I can apply them to my application overrides as I would like.
Right.
But I felt like this has turned out to be super slick as a solution. And then possibly I might do some other improvements like libraries will use on load hooks for action text or whatever it is. So if you want to extend action text to support, let's say YouTube live streams or some weird thing that you want to add to it, we could probably also do that to like the inbound webhooks model. So when it's loaded, you could build your own initializer or something that hooks into it and extends and adds an association to it or whatever without having to override the file too. But I don't see most people using those kind of library features in their own application code. And arguably, maybe you can call these models library code. But I was looking at them all and like, chances are you're not going to modify this or that or whatever. And then there's no reason for it to live and clutter your application folders. So like GoRails or Hatchbox can have like only Hatchbox related things in the app folders. And then the rest of the core functionality can live and just automatically be updated whenever Jumpstart is updated. And I merge it in and there's no conflicts and changes to the pricing page that we want to highlight something. We can just copy the view over. And the only real thing we need to look for is like, did instance variables change or helper method names change? We're going to probably catch that in development or in a test when we visit the pricing page and it blows up. So we don't make changes to that hardly ever either. So there's less churn on that code. So I've been really excited about it. I've got a few less things to fix and stuff, but I'm probably going to merge it before the new year, which is exciting. One of the things that I had to fix was like Madmin just looks in your application folder for its resources to build your admin UI. Mm-hmm. So I added a config variable that uses that by default, but it's now an array. So you can ask Madmin to look in other folders for resources too, which is kind of cool. So improving this ends up making the other gems and stuff that we're using even more maintainable and flexible and stuff in the long run as well, which is also fun. So yeah, it's been a good little project.
Sounds like you're doing a lot to make maintaining Jumpstart going forward a lot easier for yourself, which is probably the way to go.
Yeah, it's been a interesting thing because I use it for all our own products. So we get to feel those pain points with the git merge or something. And like, if you keep up on the merges, then it's not so bad. But if you let it go 6 months or a year, you're like, oh my God, how many files have changed? Like, did all of Jumpstart change? Well, actually, it might have because I've been improving so many things and making stuff compatible with Rails 8.1 or whatever. We're going to swap out tricks for Lexi. I don't know if we're going to do it right away. Lexi's still in beta, but Rails main has this new refactoring for the action text editor class. So it's going to be pluggable where you can say, this is tricks, this is Lexi, this is TipTap, this is whatever other rich text editor you want to have. It will have its own Ruby class that you can define how it interacts with Rails and renders and everything. So it's going to be really nice. And I believe that just got merged this week or end of last week or something. So nice. That'll be a really good improvement. Ideally, that would have happened when Action Text came out for the first time, but Tricks probably was planned to have a whole bunch more functionality and features and whatever. And you use one editor for your own applications, and then other people have different needs. And so you don't think about, oh, we should support, I don't know, block editors and other examples that are out there that we don't personally need or whatever. That's the hard part about building libraries and frameworks.
Oh, yeah.
Flexibility.
I mean, there's always more stuff that you just don't see coming, either work related or just the people involved. You know, people move on or disagree about things, and your whole idea for what the future of that library would be is suddenly null and void.
Imagine the last time you had to deal with request timeouts or backed up job queues in your prod environment. Frustrating, right? Here's what that means. You're either not autoscaling or your autoscaler is not doing its job, because autoscaling is supposed to prevent scenarios like this. That's why we built JudoScale. JudoScale is the autoscaler that works for Heroku, Render, Fly, and AWS. With JudoScale, you'll smoothly handle traffic spikes while dramatically lowering your hosting costs. Do you want a rock-solid production environment? Visit judoscale.com/remote Ruby to learn more.
It's been a fun project and a fun challenge and all that. So I'm excited to see that. It's going to be a little bit of a change for people who are used to Jumpstart, but it should be like an overall just really, really nice improvement. So I'm excited excited to get that done finally, because it's just one of those things that sat in the back of my mind for so long. But like, you make attempts at it and it just doesn't feel right. And like, literally, I did 2 attempts yesterday, and I was on my computer doing some stuff and then found myself in the weeds questioning an approach, and then had dinner, grabbed my laptop, and was like, let me start this from scratch again. Because I had changed and moved so many files. It was like, I discovered that we used to have we modified the scaffold templates. So we had an empty image that was like, you don't have any blog posts. You want to create one? And that image was like, fine. But over time, I was like, it dictates a bit more of the UI design that I really want. I often delete it, or I want to replace it with something else and whatever. It just didn't make a lot of sense to include by default after the years of looking at it. I discovered like image SVG still exists, and I searched for it, and I was like, there's only one place that this is used in like our API tokens index action. And this was also an interesting thing because I believe I added that before I knew that it was possible in CSS to do the only child or whatever the selector is. I use the Tailwind only modifier. So basically, you have a div, and inside of it, you could have like your blog posts. And then you have this other div inside of it that's kind of your empty state. And it's hidden by default. But if it's the only element inside its parent, it will be like display block. So it shows up without any Ruby ERB if statements. You can simply take your array of blog posts and go each and render them out. And if there's none, then the only thing in this element is that hidden thing that's marked as only block. And so it will display itself with CSS, but you can, in your browser, even edit the HTML and put a new div inside of there. And all of a sudden the empty state disappears because there's another element next to it. And so I had done this if statement. If blogpost.count is greater than 1 or exists or whatever the conditional was, else the empty state, render the SVG. So now I can just like render this element every time, and voila, it automatically does this magically with CSS. And that was one of the places that a while back I had changed our scaffold template to do that, but I had never updated our API tokens index. And those are some cool things that like I'll learn from Adam Wathen from Tailwind, and then I'll implement it, and then our customers learn about it through us using it, and they're like, oh, we can clean up our code here or there as well. Yeah. So that was fun. And then speaking of SVGs, we had pulled in the inline SVG gem, and I don't think it has any dependencies. Inline SVG. It's got no Kugeri and active support as dependencies. So basically Rails. Those are already required by Rails. So we were using that, but the only 2 places we really used it were to render your logo in the header and your icon of your business in the footer. And I was like, we should just get rid of that. Just run our own inline SVG thing. So I did that and refactored it out too. And it's been nice because like I learned a little bit about how that works, because that gem will take and read the file from disk, but it's an SVG, which is an XML document. And there are options where it can add a title element to the SVG if it doesn't have one. So that's nice for SEO or accessibility, really, is what I meant to say. But you have the file name as like logo.svg. So then when you hover over it in your browser, it says logo. And that was like a feature of inline SVG. And I got reading through the code in that and was like, yeah, we could probably do this in a couple lines, because they've got this transformers concept, and you can add ARIA attributes, titles, and classes, and all this other stuff. And I was like, I don't need this whole complex thing. Let me just read the file from disk and do the Nokogiri parsing and then spit out the string at the end. And maybe the things that we do need, like the title and the classes. We'll just implement that in line. And I understand how this works because we just grabbed that gem off the shelf one day. And that was many years ago. And I didn't know as much as I do now. So I was like, this is cool. Like now we have 0 dependencies because it's just using the same tools like they do with Rails. But like we can control and decide to add our own features or remove features or whatever it is. And, I've just been bitten by that so many times over the years. Access taggable. That's the gem you use for tags. But I don't use all the features, just very minimal ones. Then now it's not compatible with Rails 8.1. So why don't I just build my own concern that's tags and implements basically the same features or whatever? I had to do that in Go Rails recently because it was like a few forks that made sort of the minimal changes to access taggable on. You're going to use that fork or fork it yourself, but then Rails 9 is going to come out and maybe that needs to be updated again. And I was like, if we just have a simple virtual attribute that takes the text string and then splits it by commas, we can then parse and assign new tags in an array that way. That's convenient. Then when we want to re-render the form, we do the same thing in reverse. We join the array of tags with commas and spaces, and that was really the only functionality we were using for the most part. And it's like, yes, I should do that myself because that's really not very hard.
That's really all you need.
Oh yeah, that was a cool part because the class they have tags and taggings, 2 active record models in that gem. Those are under the namespace of access taggable on tag or access taggable on tagging. But they were smart that the migrations just create a tags and taggings table and they don't have the prefix on the table. So I just dropped in 2 empty files that were, well, not empty, tags and taggings, 2 new models in my models folder. A tag has many taggings and vice versa. And voila, I had more or less implemented that without even changing and doing any migrations to move the old data from access taggable on into something that is now first party in Go Rails in our code base. And I was like, I love this. Like that was great. The gem was that well written and that forward thinking of like tags is probably the better name for the table. We don't have to namespace it. If you do already have a tags or taggings table, then you'll probably want to rename one of the 2. We'll let you decide and you can do that adjustment, but it is what you would expect out of the box, which I think is nice. So been having fun. Just my list of gem dependencies, just every week, one less here and there.
Whittling it down.
Yep. It's funny because they're actually becoming the pay gem, the refer gem, the notice gem, the madmin gem. Like the only gem dependencies we have are ones that I made. So
they're all internal.
Like, yeah, it's kind of awesome because now I'm like, well, I at least understand 100% of the code in this project because I wrote all of it. And I can fix all of it.
Yeah. And you can maintain and upgrade all of it.
Honeybadger helps you deploy with confidence and be your team's DevOps hero by combining error, uptime, and performance monitoring in one simple platform. It's free to get started and setup just takes a few minutes. Be the hero your team needs. Suit up at honeybadger.io. That's www.honeybadger.io.
Is the idea then that the Jumpstart template application is going to have the Jumpstart gem and the gem file, and you'll have a separate Jumpstart?
It has for many years, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So rather than it being like a gem you download from Ruby Gems, it's a relative path. So when you clone our repo, you get a Rails app that there's actually, this is fun to talk about too, because we have your main gem file that matches Rails, except at the bottom, there's a require gem file line that actually loads our mini gem file for all of the Jumpstart dependencies, because I want the main gem file to be where you add your dependencies. So if you do want to add access taggable on, you can do that there where you normally would, but all of our dependencies are in a file that you're probably not going to touch. So if we do change stuff in there, no merge conflicts and stuff. And yeah, we have that. It loads the Jumpstart gem out of ... lib Jumpstart or whatever. It's just a relative thing that's included in the repository. So it's not even a separate repo, which is very helpful because if I do need to cut a release of Madmin to add a feature, to update Jumpstart, to fix something, managing multiple repos for most people is quite a pain. And then releasing those, and then you have to be careful what version and so on. So what's kind of nice is like, if the docs change for Jumpstart, they live in that lib Jumpstart gem file or gem, and they're always accurate to what version you are. Because if you want to upgrade, you get merge and you also get the new docs along with the changes, and everything is all there. So that makes it pretty convenient to live in one place, not separate repositories, not separate gems, none of that. Just kind of all lives in one spot, unless it's truly sort of independent like Madmin, where it's like, that's an admin interface that anybody could use. We just have it pre-installed, pre-configured, wired up, and we obviously need it then to be independent, but pre-configured that way to allow anybody to use it. But yeah, it's been a fun challenge because speaking of gem files, you reminded me. So we have a configuration file for Jumpstart because the initial thing that I dreamed of way back in the day when Jason Charnes and I started Jumpstart in a hotel in Memphis, we're talking about like the WordPress onboarding. WordPress, you extract a tarball onto your server, and then you just visit your server's IP address. And it's like, hey, welcome to WordPress. What's your database username and password? And the host. And I was like, this is awesome. Like, it has a built-in wizard, and Rails does not have that. You have to tell it that you want Postgres when you create Rails new and yada, yada. And I was like, what if we could do that where it was a wizard? So Jumpstart, since day one, has had this onboarding wizard where if there's no config file, we send you to the wizard to configure how your accounts work and what's your email provider. Do you want Honeybadger? Do you want whatever other integrations we have? Just configuration stuff like that. And then you save it, and we hit a Rails controller in the Jumpstart gem that runs bundle install and then runs like some other configuration changes. Maybe we have some initializers to set up Honeybadger and set up your API key from credentials or whatever. And then we run bin Rails restart or whatever that restarts Puma. As you're saving this configuration, it just takes a second, and then your Rails app reboots and you have the new gems and you have everything ready to go. And it's basically the WordPress experience. But at a certain point, I was pulling in the YAML parser, and I ran into an issue where it was working fine forever until Ruby updated the YAML version, and it was different. You remember those days where like Ruby, what was it, 3 or 2.7 or something? But the version that's built into Ruby was a little different than the version in your gem file. So it was interesting because what would happen is the gem file is being executed. Then at some point, we load the Jumpstart gem, and that reads the config file before it finishes pulling in your other gems. Because when you toggle Honeybadger true or false, we actually in your gem file have like a gem Honeybadger if Honeybadger is enabled. So I was requiring YAML in the middle of processing your gem file, and that causes Ruby's version of libyaml or the YAML gem to be loaded. But then at some point, then Rails or the gem file is finished, and bundler is like, what the hell are you doing? Your gem file says you want libyaml 1.0.1, but Ruby is already required 1.0.0 because that's what shipped with it or whatever the version numbers were. And I was like, this is weird. And there's like a gem file feature of like putting a conditional in there. And that didn't exactly work for what I wanted. it would still put it in your gem file lock, I think, if use that conditional flag on there's some command in the gem file that's like an if statement thing, but it would like always write it to your gem file lock and just conditionally install the gems. I didn't want them in the lock file. I want them to be basically invisible because if you didn't turn on Honeybadger, I don't want any reference to it at all. So that feature built into Bundler didn't work. And then I think it was Andre Arco was like, yeah, so this is a problem we've had too in building Bundler, because we can't load the YAML library from Ruby either, because Bundler will then cause that problem itself where the versions of YAML mismatch. So he was like, here, look at this. And there's a YAML parser built into Bundler that is from scratch that has basic support for things. And that's actually what I ended up pulling into Jumpstart in order to like pull that off. When he told me that, I knew I was so far in the weeds doing things that the average Ruby developer doesn't do. And I was like, this is cool to be in this strange position, but also like, oh my God, what the hell am I doing here? You know? But I learned a ton doing all that. Pretty fun and creative. But you did remind me as well, that's not necessarily a problem that I have to deal with, because what I realized was I could have just required a Ruby script and had you define variables and just set them to an array of strings or whatever. There's no reason I needed to have a YAML configuration file. I could have had a Ruby configuration file, and I could have set the variables integrations equals this array of strings, and then just had our configuration write a Ruby script that gets loaded. So I don't need any YAML parser at all. And I was like, oh, I should have done that. But now I've got all these users that have the YAML file. And then if you merge it in, I either have to make you manually convert it or provide a little tool to do that. Or I have to keep all the YAML version and the Ruby version of it, and then just maintain those until eventually I remove the old way of doing things. And then still people may upgrade way later and then have to do it the hard way. And I was like, this is the stuff that sucks about maintaining code, is if you build a library and you change how things are architected, it becomes such a hard thing to like just purely remove the old code that like it would be so clean if I just did it right the first time. But that legacy stuff has to live around a lot of times for backwards compatibility and ease for your users. But I've been debating that of like, maybe I can build a little thing, because I could probably just use a simple thing that detects the config.yml and then rewrites it and then just restarts or something and deletes the YAML file, and maybe I could make it seamless, because I don't think I would need the custom YAML parser if I wait to do that until Rails is booted and then Jumpstart checks to see does that file exist or whatever. So there'll be still maybe a little bit of compatibility stuff in there, but I'm going to try and squeeze that into this big upgrade, because if I'm going to do all this at once, then I might as well. What's another little change there? But those are cool things where like everybody thinks of YAML as the configuration thing for your apps. But like, you know what? Your initializers, your environments, your config folder has a lot of Ruby things that are just setting configs, but they have the ability to do a little bit of logic, which is nice. But using Ruby for configuration is actually a thing that you don't even realize that is happening. Instead of when you think of a config file, my default is a YAML file in the config folder, and then maybe it gets parsed with ERB and I can inject ERB in there. That's the last thing I want to have to support too on top of this. At that time, I just realized, why the hell didn't I just use a Ruby script? It could be a simple class or like a struct, a data object, and you just simply define the keys, and honestly, you don't even have to validate the type. So if somebody puts a string where it should have been an array, that's their fault. They were manually editing this because the controller in our configuration stuff would have written it correctly from the form data. So that seems fine. It's the same problem if somebody manually edits the YAML and doesn't get the syntax right. So yeah, you look back after a year or two on some code you wrote in the past and you're like, what was I thinking? I did this the hard way for no reason. But back then you like,
you didn't know yet.
The only way
that was the hard way.
Yeah. It's so funny to look at this stuff.
It's the story of every developer ever, like looking at code and who was the idiot who wrote this? Oh, it was me 6 months ago.
Right. I've got a good one for you. I'm talking a lot this episode, so I apologize, but I was watching the Primogen yesterday or the day before. He's got a YouTube video about GitHub Actions. And let me find this. Primogen. I will include this in the, 1 day ago. 500,000 views in a day. Amazing.
Wow.
He's got an incredible audience. All right. So he's talking about GitHub Actions. They have, and I don't know if this is a official thing that all GitHub Actions use or something that I'm not sure. This looks like it's on the GitHub Actions runner repo as a script. They have a script that is a bash safe sleep, right? So the example here is like making a ping and then sleeping for 5 seconds until you get a response or something like that. And there's some ridiculous code in there that was like Copilot generated that's just like convoluted for the sake of being convoluted because AI doesn't really know how to think. So anyways, it gets refactored or whatever into this new safe sleep bash script. This bash script says, give me how many seconds you want to wait, and then we will do a while loop that just checks to see if that number of seconds has elapsed. Okay? And it just, the while loop says, while seconds is not equal to expected seconds. And there's like a bash seconds variable I didn't know about that automatically increments for you. So it's a really simple, clean script. However, it says seconds is not equal to the argument that you passed in, which is the number of seconds you want to wait. While and a not equal with time calculations, yeah, they can't hear you, but you're starting to
I'm
laugh here.
Laughing because I think I already see the problem. If it's at 2.9 seconds or 2.99 seconds, and then the next time the loop comes through, it's at 3.01 seconds. Well, it doesn't equal the 3 seconds, so it just keeps on going.
Yeah, yeah. And this is like production code, I believe, in GitHub Actions. You can correct me if I'm wrong there, but yeah, what a ridiculous thing. It should have just been a greater than or equal to. And you know what? It's such an interesting mistake because if I'm looking at code that was generated, I do not. Well, this is the same as copying the old days of copying and pasting example code from Stack Overflow or a blog post. If I don't write every word of that, I don't have the tendency to catch these issues because when I'm writing while and I'm thinking about the comparison, the only thing I'm thinking about is the comparison. And I'm thinking about what if something goes wrong? And that's when I would realize like, oh, I do not want to do an equal or not equal. I want to say if this is ever greater than or equal to the expected value, then we break. And I think there's going to be so many situations like this. And he was showing like a GitHub action that ran for like 5,000 hours because if this misses that one specific time, it will run forever. So your GitHub actions will just run until the timeout of the overall thing. And maybe if you've extended that to be 5,000 hours or more, then maybe it just never stops until it's killed or something. And how much time and time's wasted, money is wasted because GitHub actions cost money, especially if you're running them for 5,000 hours.
Oh my God.
just how like little care goes a long ways. Paying attention to these details, and like there's no ability for you to notice these things when you're copying code or having it generated for you. The only way you're going to find this is in production. So I expect the quality of software just to like tank over the next few years, because more and more code like this will go out the door when a little human review is still not enough to catch these things. Because is the fun part reviewing code? It's so easy to gloss over little things like this. And really the only way for me to catch this would be write it myself. And as I'm going through the process, I know to think about all the edge cases, but when you're reviewing something, you can't think about the edge cases in the same way. It's really like the act of writing to organize your thoughts. Like if you're writing an essay or update or whatever, like that act of writing slows you down and you think of more things and you realize I need to tell this story differently because I just skipped to the end or whatever. I didn't build up to it correctly. And, you know, it's the same kind of process here, I think. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, computers and AI will get better. So it's maybe not a thing that will be forever, but at least in the short term where it's not great, it can do a lot of impressive stuff from scratch, but it also can't. If I use AI to go refactor Jumpstart itself, there's so many things that are intertwined and have to work a certain way that it will happily just delete to add a new feature or break old stuff, sometimes on purpose in order to make the new stuff work. And it's just not that helpful yet, but it will get there eventually. But this is why at the moment, at least humans are sort of required, because computers still can't analyze their own code that well. So yeah, anyways, I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm using Augment more, but I'm usually using it to kind of like help me understand what's going on in this area of the code, give me suggestions for how I can accomplish what I want to do. I'm very rarely asking it to actually just generate straight code for me for that exact reason. It's like, I want to really understand what the code is going to be doing that I put in the app, because 6 months from now, me is going to call me now an idiot if he has to go back and revisit this code. And
you got somebody to blame now, though, right?
I don't
You'd
want
be
to.
like, oh, that wasn't my fault. I may have made the commit, but I know that was generated by Copilot or whatever.
Gosh.
Like, dang it, Copilot, you're making me look bad again, but it's not
Like,
my fault.
I want PRs that are generated with AI generated code. I want like a flag on them. It's just like AI generated. I know I've got to look at these closer because the human didn't.
Yeah, it is a strange time. Because like you were saying, though, like if you're doing something you've never done before, you don't have a direction on how you would implement it. AI is awesome. You're like, hey, what's the best way to implement this feature? And it'll give you like several suggestions. And then you're like, okay, the trade-offs on this one seem like the way to go. Give me an example of how to implement this. And then you can maybe just copy it into your app as is, or you keep refining it and giving it more details. But eventually it's too much for context for it to keep in its head or whatever. But
it always starts hallucinating somewhere.
Yeah. But man, the ability for you to help get examples from the internet is one of my favorite things. That's where I find it so useful, because I'm like, I've never implemented anything you can think of, an event system or anything you've never done before. You can go ask it, and there's a million examples that is organized and can pull from blog posts, from Stack Overflow posts, from actual repositories of production code on GitHub that it's indexed or whatever. And then it's just like, here you go. This is how people seem to do that. Okay. Wow. It just gets me off of that, even the analysis paralysis of like starting something new. And you're just like, I don't even know where to begin. It's amazing for that. So I was also just talking to Josh Wood, and he was like, you know, it gets so many things started but then they get to like the 90% point, and the last 10% is the
hard part.
hardest. Yeah, it's the hardest other 90%. And so, yeah, I definitely feel that. And I just don't see the progression of AI going to accelerate at the same speed to actually be that smart at some point. You can still tell that they are like, this word is really likely to be after the last word, and they're truly LLMs, and you can see that in how the responses come out. But man, still impressive.
They're getting it more and more impressive, but even then, like, they're trained on some kind of data that's usually human generated stuff, and we're humans. We keep making mistakes and doing things wrong and imperfectly and learning and getting better over time. So like, it's not exactly garbage in, garbage out, but still it's like the data it's being trained on isn't perfect either. So it's never going to, I say never, and I was like, never say never, but I think it's going to be a while before it really gets to the point where it can do a lot of the things that the business side of, the business people are really hoping and imagining it's going to be able to do.
Yep. I had a friend that was laid off from his job with AI sort of as the excuse. And he was like, just bullshit, man. Like, the excuse that AI is making us 10 times more productive and that's why we don't need you. He was like, look, if we were all 10 times more productive, then your business would take over the entire market because you would be 10 times better than your competitors, which means that you would probably end up hiring more developers, not letting them go. You would be investing more into this because you are able to go take over and make a monopoly on whatever market you're in. It's exactly right. But what they're actually doing is saving costs by firing people. And then they probably feel like they can do it a little easier because they're like, well, your performance is fine, but we were running out of money and we just can use AI as an excuse to fire you. So it's strange times. And man, it is fascinating and extremely exciting. And yet it's sort of like so depressing at the same time. The volume of software is going up, the quality of software is going down, and the need for software is also going up. So it's just a weird thing because you're like, as a career, I want the quality of software to be the highest it's ever been, not to take a step back in that. And that's like why we love Ruby and Rails and whatnot, because we're like, we no longer have to worry about memory allocation. We don't have to worry about garbage collection, et cetera, et cetera. We've got these layers of abstraction, and we're not improving that way where we're able to abstract more and more. We're actually moving horizontally where it's like, well, we have the same abstractions. We're just going to use them a bit shittier. We can just pump out more stuff. So I don't know. I did see, what was the name of that security thing? There was David Heinemeier Hansen posted a PR from Rosa on, I don't know what repo it was, if anything, maybe Fizzy, or no, it looks like it was for Hey. Did you know about the sec fetch site? I believe it's a header.
Does not ring any bells offhand, no.
Okay, so I don't know about this much either, but the PR was basically like, don't rely on the authenticity token at all. For unverified requests, try to show a page with helpful troubleshooting information to the user and report to Sentry for our own inspection and troubleshooting. And that was Rose's PR. There's no actual code in here, but it appears that this is going to enforce that the request came from the same domain and it couldn't be a cross-site scripting attack at all. So you could say same origin as this header, sec fetch site, same origin, and that's going to effectively eliminate the need for the CSRF authenticity tokens for those, because I say that, but I don't know how it works. So it's one thing if your browser, because this is one of those weird things where like if your browser is making the request, it's going to enforce those things because it's following the rules. But if somebody malicious is using curl or their scripting language of choice, to go attack your site, it doesn't have to follow any of the rules. It can craft requests in any such way. So depending on how this thing works, it may be not perfect for that or whatever, but it sounds like it's been around for a long time too, widely available in all the browsers. So I'm curious, not long time, I guess, March 2023 was it when it became green for widely available. So a couple years though, 2-3 years almost. And that's the kind of stuff that somebody replied and was like, this is really what we need to improve software. Like that's kind of the abstraction around CSRF issues that now we don't have to worry about, because this is, well, and I guess if you're making a request and you have to make a GET request to get the token, then you have to send it back to be verified. Like maybe there's something here that it does similarly, but those things, if you can eliminate that, so all the nuance to the web framework that the security experts have done years ago, if you can eliminate that, then people can build new frameworks much easier. They can try new ideas out. That it's like truly an abstraction that allows you to simplify. And that's what we need more of right now, I think, more than anything. It's like Hanami is awesome because it's a whole new approach to building Ruby web applications. Lots of different ideas, lots of interesting things. But really, it's like there's Hanami and Rails and Sinatra, and that's super unchanged for years. And we don't have enough creative new things being tried. And if we could do more of that, that would be awesome. But I feel like these abstractions need to happen. And then AI is regurgitating existing things. So you don't have the same level of creativity when you're using it to build stuff. One of my favorite things about Rails is the terminology used in Active Record or anything, the rate limit class methods and whatnot. AI is just going to copy paste something from somewhere else. And so you're not going to have the moment to even think about, what should I name this or whatever, because it's already named it. It already integrated it. It just did everything for you. And you're not going to go back and question every little decision it made, which is part of the fun of designing code for me. It's like, if I lose that, this isn't a fun job anymore. And yes, there is a lot of fun to, I built something, it's in customers' hands and they're using it and it's making their lives better and I can talk to them about it. That's cool. But we lose something pretty serious along the way, I feel like.
If you're not actually able to do the building.
Yeah. I'll post a link to that secfetch site. Somebody replied to, there's a secfetch dest as well. And secfetch mode here in the end docs. I'm going to have to read up on this a little bit and learn how it works.
Yeah. Interesting.
That's a cool thing that I had never... Oh, storage access, secfetch user as well. Limited availability. Experimental storage access header. So it sounds like they're actively working on some security things built into the protocol and everything, which is cool.
That's always exciting.
Yeah. Anything that we get like JavaScript or CSS wise that we can just drop code, like those conditionals I was talking about earlier.
Yep.
So welcome. So very welcome.
Give us all of the tools and tricks.
Yeah. Well, I just took over this episode. I was excited to talk today for whatever reason.
I mean,
maybe this is how I always am. I don't know. I don't listen to the podcast.
There was one thing I wanted to bring up.
Let's hear it.
Because Evan Phoenix, he was one of the co-chairs for Ruby Central for years. He announced, I think it was a few months ago at this point, that he was starting a new company and a new kind of business endeavor. And just earlier this week, they announced like the first developer preview for the tool called Mirren. Just kind of watching the demo of him walking through it, the sense that I got from it was like old school Heroku on steroids.
Ooh, okay.
And so
I was going to ask you, what is this? Sounds exciting.
So I mean, it's
Deployment platform designed for small teams.
Yeah.
And I forget, where did he used to work? Because he has very much experience in DevOps things, right?
I forget exactly where. Like, I mostly knew him through the conferences and through Ruby Central, so I don't really actually know what his work history was very much. I know he worked on Rubinius for a long time.
Yes.
But yeah,
the musician.
Just looking at the demo of this, of what he's walking through.
Yeah, that's what it was. He was at HashiCorp for 8.5 years. So HashiCorp, everything, all things production deployments and whatnot. So he learned a ton there, I'm sure. And then he was at Engine Yard back in 2007 to 2012, also hosting company.
Mm-hmm.
So, yep, he's got lots and lots of good experience with all that. So that's really exciting to hear. They have a preview of it, so you can actually use it. Is that right? Direct download video. You can run the CLI and stuff. Cool.
It looks interesting. I haven't had a chance to fiddle with it too much yet, but any attempts at getting us back to being able to deploy as easily as it used to be back when Heroku offered the free tier where you could just push to Heroku and all of a sudden you have an app up. We've lost that ability to make it really easy to get a Rails app running and show it to people. And so
you reminded me this week, I fixed a bug in Hatchbox to make Fizzy deployment super easy. And basically the issue was like when I initially was first version of Hatchbox, we used Passenger to run Ruby. So it would just boot up your Rails application for us. And we didn't really know how any of that needed to work or whatever. It was just like, great, Passenger takes care of everything. We just restart Nginx or whatever, and we're good to go. So over time in the new Hatchbox, we've switched that around to work more like Heroku. So you have a port assigned to every application, and then you create a process, and it just is a command that we run and ensure it keeps running. And its job is to bind to that port. So your Rails server -P and whatever port number. And I don't remember why I originally did this, but we would generate the command with Puma, have Puma start your application so that we could also set up like the command to restart Puma without fully shutting down the process. So it'd like reboot your Rails app a little bit faster and more gracefully or whatever. But the downside to that was Puma doesn't actually upgrade its version then because it just kept running. So if your gem file updated Puma, then that's kind of a problem. And you don't necessarily know that it's running the outdated Puma version. So that's not a good default experience. And then also your environment variables don't get updated because Puma didn't restart either. So those variables don't change. So we ended up switching it so that we just restart Puma, but we're using a Unix socket to keep open. So requests can keep coming in. They just are delayed for a second while your Puma server restarts. But I realized that the issue with doing that is that you were booting Puma and Puma is booting Rails. Whereas if you run Rails server, you're actually booting Rails and then Rails is booting Puma. And so Rails has already required all of the directories and load path and stuff. So in Fizzy, the Puma config has a reference to the Fizzy class for some options. So it's changing Puma's configuration because of some Ruby code that they have written in Fizzy. But if you were to boot up Puma to launch Fizzy, it's going to break because it's going to say the Fizzy class is not available because Puma is going to read the config.ru for like rackup format, which is then going to run the Rails application. So the different entry point there ends up with different effectively load paths where like, I'm not sure that what it is. Maybe it's site work that is required when you go through bin Rails server. I assume that's the reason it works when you go that direction versus Puma, starting Puma to load the Rails app. Because at the time of reading the Puma config, site work or whatever Rails does to modify the load path hasn't changed yet. So the Fizzy class is unable to be, it's an undefined constant basically. And I discovered that this week and was like, oh, that's good to know. So we end up with a more compatible thing in Hatchbox to make it running your Rails apps even easier that way, which is nice. Because it's just, if this has happened like maybe 2 times in 10 years or whatever, 9 years. So it's a very rare thing that we like. When I recognized it yesterday, I was like, oh yeah, that's probably because of this and that. But probably 9 years ago when I started writing, Hatchbox, I didn't know anything about those orderings and running Puma to start Rails versus Rails to start Puma. I wouldn't have been able to tell you why that happened or anything years ago.
Right.
So it's like, this is cool. I learned something, and now Hatchbox is also even easier to use. So that was cool. But
Nice.
we still have the manual, create a database and whatever. I bet you we could. Oh, you know what? Giving me ideas of like, it's a little troublesome, but maybe we could do it. Just thinking about, the magical deployment of creating databases automatically.
Mhm.
I don't even know if Heroku, I don't remember if they did that way back in the day, but you got to create your database and attach it to your applications. We have the same flow, but I'm thinking now we could, during the first deployment, we could check and say, oh, Postgres is in here. Also, in your cluster you're deploying to, you have a Postgres server. So why don't we go create a database and attach it automatically for you? So you don't even have to think about the database creation step, because typically the first deploy fails because you forgot to create the database. And we have a little to-do list at the new application before its first deploy. It's like add any environment variables, create a database, and add your DNS or something. And we don't create the databases for you because unless we are running the deployment, we can't tell, do you have a Postgres? Is your database YAML using Postgres? If it is, then we could create an environment variable for the database URL. We could probably also analyze your database YAML and pull out all the production or whatever environment you're deploying, pull out all of those and create databases for them if they don't exist already using the same adapter. I bet we could do that. That would be kind of cool. We may have to actually boot the Rails application, like the Rails runner, so that we could say active record base connection or something to actually config for, I think is the thing. Like you can pull out the production configs and see that, because you could do MySQL and SQLite and Postgres and SQLite or combos now that you have multiple database support.
Yeah.
So it's not a simple thing, but we could take the extra step of a really tight integration with Rails that nobody else can do, because like Mira and hopefully will do those types of things and be tightly integrated to a framework. But it's so much code to maintain for every framework and changes so often that like we would have the benefit of doing that extra work. But a Roku, a Render, Railway, whatever, they're like, look, it's not that hard to just click a button and create a database and attach it. And it's like, yeah, sure. But for the beginners, it would be really convenient. It'd be convenient for me because I still make the mistake of, I forgot to make the solid queue database and whatever. You got a good point there. I think all of this stuff is heading in the right direction of like, what if it was abstracted and you didn't have to think about it?
Right.
Cool. I'm going to have to watch that video. I'm excited to see that.
I was kind of excited just watching the video. So I hope things go really well for him and that it catches on.
Same. Yeah. That's awesome. Well, unless you've got anything else, time to call it a day.
Yeah, I think it's about that time. I don't have a whole lot else going on at the moment.
I've got database generation stuff to think about now that you've planted the seed.
Chris is always getting ideas from somewhere.
This is cool. Like you planted the seed and it's already sprouting. Like I've got ideas now of how I'd implement that, and I'm going to write up some notes before I forget. So thank you, but also no thank you for the pain of now I got another idea to explore.
I mean, you are under no obligation, Chris.
All right. Let me go write this down before I forget.
All right.
Catch you probably next week.
Next week, yeah. Have a good week.
All right. See you, man.
Bye.